Can you tell me what is breath rate variability?
Sure. It feels like everyone is talking about HRV recently. I think you've done a great deep dive on it, which, as people probably remember, is the idea of like variability between the heartbeat's amplitude. And it tells about a lot of things about your nervous system state and so forth. And breathing variabilities, there's two concepts that are very similar. You have RRV, so respiratory rate variability, just like the breath to breath interval and the variability between them. And you have then BRVs, like that plus the tidal volume. So it's like the variability between, you might have the same pace, but then there might be like the volume might change depending on how much you breathe. But ultimately, they both measure the same thing, which is like the state of the nervous system. And unfortunately, like when I looked into the first, like obviously with the device, we can understand that. And so I was looking into like, what would it tell you? Like, if you could measure this, what would be the value? And unfortunately, there's just not that much science done on this. I think the reason is that so far, really, if you think about what are the accurate ways of measuring this breathing variability, it really is like, capnography. So you have something in your mouth and you can actually measure accurately your CO2 levels and the rate super accurately. And where you have it is actually what ICU, like the intensive care unit, emergency room. So like it's not that many environments where you measure this these days. So if you look at the research papers on BRV or RRV, most of them are like, where is this useful for predicting stuff for ICU or for people coming into emergencies? And they have noticed, for example, patterns around if you have like on the higher side, it can predict like you're going to be it'll be easier for you in the intensive care unit. But there's also like opposite sides. If you have very kind of too high, it can also be dangerous. So it does seem like with most things in biology, with breathing variability, you want to have it in this Goldilocks zone. So it's not too low, it's not too high. It's in this perfect balance where you can actually have this beautiful flexibility of the breathing rate. So where there's no rigidity, which happens if you have too much like this cadence that is very rhythmic, too rhythmic, basically. And I guess the big question here is like, if you start looking at this same metric for healthy people in their day-to-day life, what would it tell you? And there's only some glimpses. There was one paper done with meditators, and they looked at like if they had like way higher breathing variability than normal people, like there's monks and so forth. And it seems to suggest that there's something similar to HRV here going on, where having this flexible, a little bit higher side, but not too high, BRV would then be a great marker potentially for understanding the state of the nervous system. And the good thing about it, as you very well know, is that it's a bit more leading indicator. So HRV tends to be a bit lagging; it happens afterwards, whereas BRV might be something we have. Well, first of all, we have more control over, but also it's kind of happening right now. So and something I'm excited about is like actually scaling this and seeing whether it could be something kind of the next HRV and something that people actually benefit from quite soon. But we'll see.
Yeah, and maybe what we could do actually, for people that don't know, could you just give us a helicopter view of what HRV is, just for the audience that might not be aware?
Yeah, so I'm definitely not the expert here. I think you've done a great episode on it, and then there was a recent one that Dr. Jay Wallace did with on the modern wisdom. So recommend people checking that out or yours. But basically, it's there's like cadence of heart rate, and it's rhythmic, but it's not like exactly the same. So there's a kind of variability between how the heart rate is happening, and basically, it's a good indication of the state of the nervous system. And people always like to have like a little score they can get up. Like, VO2 max is a great one because people love it. The better, the higher it is, the better. But with HRV, it's not quite as simple. It's first of all, there's many ways of measuring it, calculating. They're of course very similar to each other, but ultimately, it is it is really personal. Like your number shouldn't be like really compared to other people, but it does tell like the delta between your baseline and where you are now is interesting. And if you can get it like higher than your baseline is, it generally is a good thing. It talks about resilience. It's the state of the nervous system. It's like whether you're sleeping well. So there's a lot of things that play into what is your HRV, and especially in sleeping because you're not really controlling it. It's a really interesting indicator of like of multiple things like the sleep quality and other things. And I actually saw, I think it was a tweet or on LinkedIn just recently about somebody using capnography to look at the breathing and then measuring HRV. And it was interesting that he mentioned that the sleep score didn't change, but when he was breathing poorly, having like apnea-like symptoms, it actually changed his HRV first. So basically readiness score if you have like aura, whoop or something. But so anyway, the point being like it is a good indicator of where our nervous system is, but it tends to be a little bit lagging. And it's a good like thing to actually start thinking about how can I little by little like, improve against myself, not comparing against my friend.
Yeah, I can't believe I've never heard of it until we met a couple of days ago,
Or
and
the
it's
BRV,
just
you mean?
abs BRV, yeah,
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
absolutely blown me away, and so I know it's early days, and I can't wait to talk about your device and the story of that, but I'm just curious to know, like, do you feel like breath rate variability is influenceable through breath work? Do you feel like there's a way to improve it?
I mean, if you look at the science behind how you don't know, maybe some of the audience people don't know the concept of RSA, so respiratory sinus arrhythmia. It
Mm.
basically refers to this concept where breathing influences your heart. And especially it's, you think about the heart rate, you can actually see it if you measure each one, that you have a second cadence per heartbeat. Some of them are actually 0.95, some of them are like 1.10. And that change is happening when you inhale, it becomes faster. When you exhale, it becomes slower. And that's kind of what it's measuring. And there's been really kind of, I would say, strong evidence now that if you do a specific breathing rhythm, for example, what's called resonance breathing, so you're trying to get your breathing rate into a specific rhythm, and that is in same oscillations with your heart rate, um, it actually can then influence your nervous system in very specific ways. And some of these are, of course, kind of things that are kind of influencing in that moment. So you've kind of something changes in that moment. But the question is there a trade change? Something that happens and like stays with you long term? And again, there was a great deep dive by Dr. Jay Wiles, but he really kind of talked about the fact that it does actually stay long term with resonance breathing. Um, and basically, it does seem to suggest that with breathing, you can influence both the BRB, because it's kind of correlated with HRB, and HRV, if you can train your breathing in oscillation with your heart rate. And one of the most interesting, or kind of simple metaphors that I've heard here is like, think about this, like you have a child. What's it called? Like where you kind of the swing, a swing, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you think of a swing and you're trying to push it like, and if you push it at the wrong time, you actually, it's kind of hard. There's a lot of resistance, there's friction. But if you keep pushing it in the right rhythm, it's kind of easy. And then it becomes like natural and it's happening almost on its own. And what's interesting is that there, of course, are some suggestions of like what is the right oscillation for each person. Like probably around whatever 5 to 10 breaths per minute, but actually it does vary per person quite a lot. And more importantly, like if you want to get into this rhythm, if you think about this rhythm, you can't be quite there. It has to be actually pretty exact, down to the level of like ideally like 4.7 seconds in, and then whatever 6.2 seconds out. And you can use laboratory measurements to actually kind of measure what is the right cadence for you. That's kind of something we're hoping that we can do with, if we can hear both the breathing sounds and the heart sounds, is actually get this RSA and show you like what is the right cadence for you to get into resonance right now, and then start having these kind of trait changes over time for resonance breathing. So the short answer is, can you change your BRV? Because you can change HRV, most likely you can also change BRV.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to see what the emerging science looks like over the next few years with this, because instinctively, with everything I've seen, it just feels like this is an important marker. So I would love for you to tell us, for those watching this, what is that ring that is on your chest? What's going on there?
Yeah. Well, in short, it is a breathing wearable. And through breathing, we can, of course, then get to the nervous system. So we talk about a new kind of wearable for breathing control and nervous system regulation. And fundamentally, for those watching or those listening, it's basically this kind of pebble shaped device that is a mechanoacoustic sensing. So it has this like dual sensor inside that is measuring vibrations in your chest or body, basically. It's a little bit similar to like a stethoscope, technologically wise, but we just made it much, much smaller in size, so we can then get similar kind of, lung sounds, the breathing rate, but also hopefully we don't have a lot of data on this, but also heart sound will be very interesting as we discussed to couple them with the breathing. And then maybe what's innovative about this beyond the sensoring technology is the way you clip it. So obviously, if you think about modern wearables, a lot of them tend to be in the peripheries. You have smart rings, you have bracelets, you have smartwatches, and of course they've like changed the game of what's possible for health and wellness in many ways. But at the same time, it does feel like there's a physical limit to what you can do in the periphery. So if you want to get to the interesting stuff, particularly when you think about this long-term vision of having this 24-hour monitoring for really kind of healthcare, where you start merging the AI doctors with sensors, you need to have like clinical level data. And that's really happening in this kind of chest or torso. And so the way we solve that is how to get there is with a magnet. And it's been proven out by like in, for example, microphones in the film industry. You have these like magnet providers that you can put a microphone here. And basically that's how it works. So you clip it on into a piece of clothing. The sensor goes against your skin. So that's important. It has to be touching the skin at all times. And then you clip it on basically like this. And it goes through, can be a couple of layers of clothing. That shouldn't be like super thick. Say that very thick, maybe have just on a t-shirt so you don't see the outer piece. And the outer piece is basically a bit of magnets with a cover. So that's kind of what it is in short.
Mm.
And
And so
in
is oh,
yeah,
please.
no, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, so this is listening to your breath as opposed to detecting the movement, or is it doing both? Like, how is it observing the breath?
There is both sensors. So you have this like vibration-based sensor. Listening is maybe a bit of a dangerous word because people then feel like, oh, it's listening to everything I'm saying. And the
Okay.
answer is no, we don't have like a microphone that is listening to like things happening in the airwaves. It's only happening to vibrations like that are mechanoacoustic basically. So it has to be touching, otherwise there's nothing that is captured. But you're right, there's also an accelerometer, not for the purpose of like capturing the breathing rate per se, but just to be able to like then understand motion artifacts and be able to remove them from the signal, and also like understand if you're running and so forth, so we can then see how your breathing rate changes in different scenarios. So we don't always need like another wearable to tell us like what's happening, so we can actually detect stuff ourselves. But yeah, it's a kind of both.
Okay. And so for people then, what would be the benefit of knowing like your respiratory rate? What's the benefit of observing your breath like this?
Well, I feel like I'm a little bit preaching to the choir here, but like if you think about breathing, it's it's such a beautiful marker in many ways because it's a both a window to the nervous system. So it's like we can talk about that in a moment more,
Mm.
but it's actually one of the only levers as well. So you can actually change the state of your physiology using the breathing. So those are the two interesting things here. And when it comes to like what can you do, it's because it's captured. Like you think about the way it's currently captured. Like most wearables, they have some sort of respiratory rate already, but the way they do getting that is through deriving it from your heartbeat, of your pulse. And it's if you've ever tried like breathing, let's say 6 times per minute, so very slowly, you'll notice, at least I noticed, and talking to anyone else, it's the same. Your data doesn't change, at least in my Whoop or Aura, it's like 15, even though I'm definitely breathing 6 times a minute. So it's just like because it's derived, it's indirect, it's hard to see the reality of the breathing in real time. And because of that, you can't get to this nuance. For example, if you think about what are the interesting markers, if you want to develop something called nervous system score or nervous system index, it's a state of your nervous system right now. In breathing, there's multiple things we can kind of take and calculate into that marker. So, for example, if you have longer exhalations than inhalations, the length of those two, it typically means you're in parasympathetic state. If you're doing a lot of sighing, it typically means you're also in sympathetic state. Like you basically you're getting like wired up, but you're not like resting. Um, if you do micro pauses, if you have like these super inconsistent breathing, if there's sounds around using mostly your chest, which by the way we're still investigating whether we can get diaphragmatic breathing and acoustically different. If you're mouth breathing versus nose breathing, like all those are great markers for the fact that you're basically in sympathetic state. So we can use all of that. That has to be really accurate in order to actually get the reality into calculating like your sympathetic or parasympathetic or something in between. And the same, of course, is true for more kind of generally breathing. Like there's a lot of interesting things beyond just nervous system you might be caring about. Like a lot of people these days care about mouth breathing just on its own. So being able to kind of listen to that and then hear, hey, that is happening, and then nudge people like in the moment. So we have like a haptic sensor, so you can get a little nudge. Hey, Patrick, you've been mouth breathing for the last 2 minutes. Do you want to do something about it? Like just be aware of it, first of all. Or maybe like recommend a quick breathing exercise. So do a bit of like slow nose breathing, which then most likely will at least help you in the coming hour to mouth breathe less. So there's a bunch of things you can do, but I think if you summarize what is the benefit here overall, one is to help you become more aware of your body and your breathing, which in and of itself it can be really valuable as a first step of just like when you're learning and becoming more aware, because then every time you kind of become aware, like with meditation, you kind of train this muscle of awareness, like the meta awareness. Number two is insight. So then, like once we learn patterns, we see different things. We can actually give you with modern kind of AI with actual insights about what's happening, especially if we have other data points like around what you've been doing, where you've been doing, what time. Maybe there's like a link with calendars, so we can understand, maybe a meeting that's been always sympathetic or something. So like the insights is going to be really valuable, and I think that's kind of where it feels like the wearables are already going. But hopefully, we can take the next step of like combining the physiological markers with actual insights that is based on like what we know is true, instead of just giving like numbers, because like a lot of people don't know what to do with numbers. So it has to be like, hey, because of this, you might want to do Y. And then when we give a recommendation, we can have this feedback loop where we see the impact of your action, for example, a breathing exercise, and we see it immediately in the physiology. That's the beautiful thing about breathing, is if you give like a recommendation or do 1 minute long exhale exercise, we see if it works, and not it doesn't work for everyone, right? So then if we see it works, we'll recommend it more for the same situation. And if it doesn't, then we can do something else next time. So there's a beautiful feedback loop that then trains the model to actually give you better and better recommendations, which then taking the last piece, which is the actual kind of routines. So of course, there's a lot of breathing apps out there already, and they're great. But if you think about what they're doing, is they kind of are forced to be very generalized. So they're giving the same, like let's say box breathing is always 4 4 4 4 seconds per side. Unfortunately, people are different. Well, lung capacities are different, so you can't. It what works with somebody with this doesn't work for somebody else. So what we can hopefully do is, because we understand the baseline, your breathing rate over the week, over the day, is we can start personalizing that for each individual and for each moment. So maybe for an athlete, it should be 6 seconds per side on the box breathing. And for someone with maybe a bit of anxiety, want to have it maybe 2 seconds per side. And maybe for you, even though you're an athlete, we see that you're kind of breathless right now. Maybe it should be like go from 6 to 5 today. So that's the kind of the parameter changes we can make through understanding both what's happening and then giving you like real-time guidance, like when you're doing the exercise. So anyway, those are maybe the kind of quick summary of the key benefits we're hoping to achieve. And really, if you think about the what this could be like as an experience, is like having this like co-pilot for your nervous system. So you can be always in the ideal state. You wake up, you get this quick routine that predicts you probably want to do this thing because we know you're going to work. You energize, then it sees that you're in a meeting and you're in sympathetic, you're still, so you're not moving. It sees you're in like a stress state, give you a little quick nudge, bzz, bzz, and then make a recommend, hey, do you want to do exercise? I'm like, not now, but just being aware of what's happening. Kind of, okay, let me take a quick breath, deep breath, and be more present with my team and at work. And then, of course, same thing with home. You come home, your 2-year-old is trying to like, Mike, let's play, and then you're still thinking about some work stuff, and just being like getting a quick nudge, like, hey, when that's happening, you're still in this like little chronic anxiety. You have a lot of sighing, you have a lot of inhales versus exhales, like nudging you, and maybe recommend, do you want to do 1 minute exercise? Could be like a life changer for a lot of people. So anyway, that's a short
It's very
summary.
cool. As I said to you before we hit record, like I when you explained what this was, I got genuinely excited, and I don't think I've ever felt that excited about a piece of like breath tech before. And so I was like, especially because it looks so sexy as well and so discreet. Um, I want to get into, like what you've been through with the breath, but I'm just thinking, I know you've got a Kickstarter going on at the moment. So do you want to just tell people a bit about that? Because I know there's only a few days left on that.
Yeah. So obviously, when you're building a hardware company from scratch, there's a lot of things involved, and one of them is manufacturing. And
Mhm.
if you look at the graveyard of hardware companies, one of the reasons is that you kind of either produce too little or too many. Usually, you just produce too many. And so what Kickstarter helps you with is just understanding where are you right now in terms of like the audience demand, and you just produce the right amount at the right time. And of course, it feeds the your understanding of like what is the demand right now with what we have, and then helps you have a conversation with potential investors around, hey, this is the market. We need X to really build this for the next level, and maybe start building the next kind of version of the device, right? So that's kind of the story why we did it. And as you mentioned, we've been doing that now for a couple of weeks. We're really fortunate to have like early fans get us to the kind of the limits of what we were looking for. But yeah, if I think we're going to be probably releasing this episode by the time we'll have maybe a week or so left. So if there's anyone interested in like getting a device that is going to be much cheaper than it's going to be once we fully release that, then they can do so on Kickstarter. Just Alveos one, I think you can find it. And then basically the next time you can get it will be probably towards the end of 2026 is when we start kind of selling the device from the inventory in globally, basically. So anyway, if there's anyone who's like, this sounds for me, then I really appreciate your support in making this a reality.
Well, that was one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you. I thought we need to share this message with people. So I'll put the link below this,
Thank you.
and then yeah, if people are interested to learn more, they can have a look. Um, just curious, like who would you say like this would be mostly for at this stage? Like who would it benefit the most? Do you think?
Yeah. I think we've defined pretty clear kind of personas or what seems to be the best fit right now, and it really comes down to a few things. So one is you probably have this feeling of like a slight chronic stress in the background. It doesn't have to be like something you have, lose sleep over every night, but just like this constant little niggling feeling in the background that it's something is not quite, you're not quite the master of your own nervous system. You're almost like a passenger sometimes. You get a Slack, you immediately go into this thing, and maybe get an email, your system goes like haywire, and you lose sleep over that one message that you got. Maybe you're not quite as present as you want at home. So most likely it's going to be people that are in kind of knowledge work, in this maybe executive roles. Doesn't have to be, but they tend to be like in the state where they have this pressure from the top down and from the bottom up to perform. Most likely also these people already have a wearable of some sort because it takes like the step of like for the first time acquiring one. And I think in the future, Alveos might be the first wearable for a lot of people. But in right now, where we are, it probably makes sense to really speak to the people who already understand what it is about, but are a little bit frustrated with what we have. It's not quite enough what they have. It's a little bit too lagging. They get the score in the morning and they're like, it's already done. Like, what should I do now? So they want something a bit more real time. They want something that's a bit more rich data sets that they can actually to work with. And so hopefully we can actually provide like the different kind of solution that complements what they already have, whether it's Apple Watch or something else. And then maybe finally, like, there's a kind of the first step and I think the first audience, but then we did clearly map out that like pretty soon, of course, athletes or people that are really care about their performance would be an interesting one. But the only reason that we kind of narrowed down of that for now is that we weren't sure about the workout tracking. Can you actually get accurate data despite all this kind of motions artifacts that are happening when you're running? But I'm happy to say that we can. I think you'll probably see it on the page by the time it's released. But we're going to be releasing this cool thing we just recorded yesterday. So I was running in the office like really fast, and we then showed the data on the screen. And I was surprised. Like it is really accurate even when you're running. I think the reason is because like the when you're doing like sports, your breathing rate becomes louder, right? So unlike with ECG, if you have a heart rate monitor, which is deriving the breathing rate from the pulse, because the pulse gets quicker, it's harder to get the actual breathing rate. So whereas with the breathing, because it's louder, it's easy to hear that. So as long as you have the sensor touching your skin, which can be done either with a strap accessory, or if you have a tighter shirt or a sports bra with a magnet, then it comes through very beautifully. So I think that's probably why, like, yes, we'll start with knowledge workers that are stressed out, have a wearable, like health conscious before
Yeah.
high performers. But then probably very soon we'll probably look at the athlete section because there's a lot of people that are even not professional athletes, but just like people that are care about their performance in athletics, kind of recovery. So I think we can really help there as well.
It's very cool. I can't wait to get my hands on one. Honestly, it's like my geek brain on breath is just like on fire. Um, so I got into breath work through like stress, anxiety, and then Wim Hof got me in. So I'm curious, like, what's made you create this device? Like, what's your kind of entry into the world of breath?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of two stories that then kind of merge together. I think on my side, um, I was 11 years prior to Alveos in kind of applied machine learning, so in technology, and kind of saw the power of what you can do with kind of a personalization at scale. So meaning changing the experience for different people, but within commerce. And I was kind of thinking about like what would that look like for preventative health, which I was something personally passionate about, investing in all the gadgets and tools and CGMs and doing fasting and all that stuff. Let's just do. I guess it's something you have curiosity for and you learn about it as much as you can. And of course, kind of on the behavioral side, like behavioral psychology is something I just read all the books I could get hand off, like Kahneman, Tversky, and so forth. But I was basically at this point where I was like itching to build something that I felt was like meaningful in the preventive health space. And I was looking at the wearables, I think for this reason that I mentioned to you, like I had this like just belief that in 10 years, it would feel weird if we're not at a point where most people on Earth will have some sensing technology that is constantly monitoring their health. It just makes sense. And the question is like what it looks like, what it feels like. Is going to be under the skin, who knows? But like something that is on there and just basically helping you understand what's happening in real time. And then, of course, connect to your maybe AI doctors or something. So that was the original belief. And I was looking at what are the different possibilities that are not tapped into it, but maybe are unlocked recently with like technological advances. The specific idea for Alveos came actually from my brother. He was like a semi-professional ice hockey player and had been struggling with asthma from adulthood. There's I'd been actually asthmatic as a child, but I got kind of it automatically went away. But in his case, it really became more prominent in his adulthood, and it was really kind of making his life difficult with particularly athlete, requiring like, oxygen tanks and so forth at some point, and inhalers, like depending on inhalers, as many are in the world. And what he found, I think, after a bunch of exploration, he tried like everything, right? Like maybe cold or this or that. And what seemed to work is actually breath work. So I think it was Buteyko breathing. It was stuff from Patrick McEwen. I know you interviewed him a couple of times, but also like stuff he started building on his own, like based on everything he was learning, and came up with this like protocol that he now does every morning. And he managed to basically get rid of, well, at least the asthma symptoms. So I don't want to say that you can cure your stuff, but you can definitely get rid of the symptoms. Well, it seems like for NO1. So anyway, that was the premise, and then but he still need to do the exercises every morning. Otherwise, the symptoms came back. So the question was like, what is happening when I'm not conscious of my breathing that then makes me need to do the exercises every day? And then he was because he heard about me talking about the wearable space, and he was like, Patrick, is there a wearable that actually would help me detect my breathing rates and the patterns of my breathing, mouth breathing, like when I'm not thinking about it? And we looked at the market, and as you may know, there wasn't much available. There was Firestone was something that had a lot of fans in the US, but it was basically discontinued some years ago. And even that was basically mostly like a movement-based sensor, so it would not have given you things like mouth breathing. Um, then you had Oxa Health, Oxa Life, I think, from Switzerland in Europe some years ago. We actually managed to get our hands on one before it kind of shut down. I think they were acquired by a healthcare company, and no longer available for consumers. But really kind of, I don't know, did you try it, Mike, yourself, the Oxa
I
Life?
did. I had a little play with it. I couldn't really get on with it. I needed like the band, and it was, ugh, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, like if you try to
yeah.
figure out what are the things that we can learn from that? I think one, as
Mm,
you mentioned, is the form factor. Like if you have a band that is pretty tight, or what
mhm.
they call smart clothing that is also very tight, it's the last thing you want if you have struggle with breathing, right? So the form factor, we need to like remove the band. It just wasn't going to work with that. And the second thing is like, even though the rate was super accurate, like you can literally see every single breath hold down the level of like milliseconds, but it was not enough. Like for Oliver, at least, like he really was interested in the mouth breathing, and you can't get that unless you can kind of hear the acoustic kind of vibrations. And there's a different signature to the acoustic vibration of mouth breathing versus chest breathing, versus nose breathing. So it wasn't quite enough on either side. the beautiful thing that did was really well is the biofeedback. Like you can literally hear your own breathing with like almost like a wave sound. And I really kudos to the team there, like how they did that. I think we can probably take example of how you can create this experience where just hearing your own breathing in your own ears, like it just becomes like meditational. So anyway, that was the market that was available, but again, it wasn't quite enough. It did take another almost 2 years of actual work to get to a place where we had the POC. We could prove that you can actually miniaturize this kind of stethoscope style sensoring technology into a smaller form, although it was still like, with wires and stuff. And also we did a bit of market validation with this test with the pre-launch.com. You can test the concept and see if people give you like $1 to deposit to kind of reserve the device. And once we have those two things where it's like, okay, there seems to be a demand for this, people really want it, and for many different reasons. Like I wasn't expecting how different reasons people have for understanding their breathing. It's not just the nervous system and stress. That's a big one, probably the biggest one, but it's not the only one. That we can talk about all the different things people are expecting this to use for. And the second thing was technologically, it seems to be doable. It's going to be difficult, but doable. And so that gave me the courage then to kind of jump full time, basically um, August last year. And it's been a ride. So we've raised a bit of cash, and now we're in this Kickstarter stage. And as mentioned, we're aiming then to deliver the products by September. So we have manufacturing Q&A, and then we're going to do a validation study actually starting next week. So by the time we release this, most likely we'll already have it ongoing with our scientific advisor, John Dickinson, professor from University of Kent. And I'm really excited just to make sure like we are up there with the gold standard, which in breathing is spirometry. So we really want to make sure like whatever we build is grounded in research and validated in clinical settings. So it's not just some gadget
Ooh,
that, primitive stuff and has a like off-the-shelf sensor, but it's like something we built from scratch from sensing technology and needs to be validated. And of course, we have a patent for that technology. So, or not patent, but patent pending, just to be clear. It's not,
mm,
it'll take 2 years before they reply
yeah,
you if it's worthy of
yeah.
patent.
Very cool. And so I'm just my mind's all over the place. I'm curious. So, when the doctor puts the stethoscope on you, you're not feeling very well. They're looking like, is there fluid in the lungs? Are you a bit goggly there? Like, do you do this, or do you think it could be a place where like it has like early detection if you're starting to get sick or having some sort of lung infection?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Like, it is definitely like a super into space. Like, what are the things that you could hear and detect, predict, and
Mm,
diagnose from the
mm,
torso? That's the question, right? And
mm,
and the answer is probably a lot of things. Like, of course,
mhm,
all things related to respiratory system. So the pneumonia, like asthma, like there's a lot of things there. But also like all the heart stuff, right? I just spoke with someone yesterday who had this AFib, right? It's like the um, like when it comes to your heart isn't quite in the right shape, you have this arrhythmia and so forth. Like there's a lot of things on the heart side you could potentially at some point in the future look at. So all these things require, of course, like FDA clearance in the US, in Europe, MDR. There's different classifications. If you're diagnosing, it's class 2B device. And to get there, it's like takes usually millions of euros and like several years of clinical studies and so forth. So the way we're thinking about it is that we're starting now as a wellness device. So we're not going to mention any of those things like asthma on the webpage, just to make sure like it's a wellness device. We're not going to do that. But then in the background, for the coming years, we'll be doing these little pilots and clinical studies. We probably will start with the most obvious target here, which is the asthma. If you think about asthmatics these days, there isn't that much technology that is helping them right now. There's the medicine, of course, which is really crucial. But beyond that, really the most kind of interesting technology they have is a smart inhaler, which just counts if they have taken the medicine. So it's like, okay, that's great, but like it doesn't really help you much beyond adherence, like making sure you take the drug. So what we're gonna do is see if we can first just observe and kind of see what are the things we can hear. The wheezing sound most likely can be heard, and apparently, according to our medical advisor, Ashish Vyas, he has 20 years in NHS and really deep into kind of both asthma and other respiratory challenges. And for him, he mentioned that he would be really interested to see if we can hear the wheezing sound, whether it's an inhale or exhale. And that would apparently be really interesting about understanding the inflammation situation, and then potentially kind of hearing whether you should take your reliever medicine now instead of in an hour. Because what's happening, particularly in the UK, I'm sorry, guys, but in the UK, there's a lot of cases where they take it too late and then you go to ER. In Finland, for whatever reason, at least speaking to the doctors here, the situation is a bit less dire, so I have much less hospitalizations due to asthma. But in the UK, it's not great, and then same as many other countries globally. I think in the US as well, you have a lot of actually deaths and mortality due to asthma. So point being, like, if we can start hearing that in like a pilot study, let's say in 2026, we can then expand on that 2027, and then over, like, let's say if you zoom out 10 years, you kind of get this clarification or get the certification per one thing. At the end result is you have FDA clearance for 20 different potential things you can diagnose. And that's, of course, a beautiful place because then you can actually save lives and actually become like a true medical device, not just a wellness device. So anyway, that's kind of the vision of what it could be in the future. And by the way, I don't think we should do all them ourselves. Like if you think about the app experience, the intention is to build a platform where other people can actually build interesting things and use cases, almost like a digital therapeutic on top of the platform. So they can use our hardware, they can use our kind of data layer, but they can then build whatever they want, whether it's a cycling app or they want to build a thing for mental health. It's just unrealistic that we would build all those things in-house. So most likely we'll try to empower other people to do really interesting stuff with the acoustic sensing and the preventive health layer.
Yeah, very cool. Can you, is there anything else you can share about the Kent study you're about to do? Can you just give us, is there any parameters you can share or what you're hoping to find from that?
Yeah, it's basically with health individuals. They have a couple of different devices on one is magnet, one most likely adhesive, just to see if there's a difference there. And then the spirometry, as you know, is like this thing which you put on. It's kind of the gold standard in respiratory measurement. And then we'll get them to do a bunch of different like things as part of the protocol. You have like walking, you have talking, you have a bit of running, or at least like exercise. And essentially, what we're trying to understand is like whether the accuracy is on par or at least close to in terms of like the respiratory rate. That's the first thing we'll look at. There's a few other things we'll look at, like inhalation to exhalation ratio and a few other things. But the key thing is like where everything starts is the respiratory rate. And ideally, we want to get it to like like within 1 or 2 BPM or like a breaths per minute compared to the gold standard. Because if you can do that, especially when you're like still, then it's like a game changer for many things. And we want to, as you know, obviously when it's done in this like laboratory setting, you can be sure that it's like a third party, and it's like validated by not just our team, and then we can utilize that to do other studies in different settings in different universities afterwards. So yeah, the hope is just to kind of ensure that we are accurate. And let's see, I don't want to put like a number on it, like what is the accuracy rate, but based on internal validations, we've seen some good signs, and especially with we did a couple of weeks ago this test on mouth to nose breathing. Okay, very small sample size, so don't quote me on this later on, but we saw 95.3% accuracy on detecting whether you're breathing with your mouth or with your nose across people. And that's like with very rudimentary level of data and algorithms. So once we have more, it is likely we can do much, much better. So anyway, that's less than one example of what we know already, and but hopefully we can do much more in the future.
Yeah, I heard, I don't know if this is true, but I heard this a couple of years ago that if there's a microphone in the room and you're on and I think it was Apple Mac specifically, when you type in your password, AI had gotten so good, it knew the distance between each of the keys in the microphone, and it was able to get your password because of the small fluctuations in sensitivity between, like, say, the A and the S and the W and how you hit them and stuff. And so I guess to me, it sounds like the more that
Crazy.
that technology improves, the more you're, because I'm just curious, like if you would be able to yet or later detect about chest versus diaphragmatic breather. I know we all use the diaphragm, but generally we have like a vertical breather where they're engaging all these kind of upper muscles, and then we have like the more congruent, anatomically correct breather where they're breathing, abdominally low and 360. That that in itself, I assume, will have different sounds. I don't know. Have you looked at that yet, or is that something potentially for the future?
Yeah, it's definitely super interesting to look at. And maybe as a side note, I think I mentioned this to you. Like over the course of 2025, I spoke with, I don't know, between 70 and 80 people in kind of breath coaching in different fields, and we could talk about that. But like, if I always ask them, like, what is the one thing you would
Mhm.
want to learn, like, and detect? And the number one answer was whether you're chest breathing or diaphragmatic breathing. And specifically, what they want is to be able to nudge people. Like, if they detect chest breathing, they would love for their customers to basically have get a nudge. Hey, dude, remember, like, see if you can use the diaphragm better. And so, but yeah, I think you're right. Like, it would feel at least intuitive. I don't have the data to prove it yet. That's the sound of diaphragmatic breathing should be quite different if you just like very shallow
Yeah.
chest breathing. The good thing is, like, as a proxy, we can also
Mhm.
use the accelerometer, because if it's on your chest, it's likely that when you hear the vibe, like the if you have a deep kind of breathing wave and your chest is not moving, it is pretty likely that you're using a diaphragm, right? So even if the sound signature is not like detectable, which again I think it will be, there's other ways we might be able to capture at least a proxy for this using the combination of sound of the vibrations with the accelerometer. So we'll see, but that would be super exciting once we can prove that out.
Very cool. Yeah. So this is a tangent, but it will make sense. So I'm a big Jack Reacher fan. I love reading the Jack Reacher books, and I remember it was like I think it was
Nice.
book two. They were at some sort of ranch, and there was like a militia, and they were all like shooting targets. They all had sniper guns, I think, and they were like shooting like static targets. But then when Reacher turned up, and suddenly there was a moving target, none of them knew what to do because he was like trained to deal with it. And the tangent is this: like a lot of us, when we're working with people or we're trying to work on like diaphragmatic breathing and we're trying to relax those shoulders, a lot of it's done in like stationary positions. But the minute you give somebody load, like go for a run, go and lift this, like it becomes a completely different beast. And so I guess what you've just got me really excited about there is you would be able to know, like, okay, at this part of your gym session, you became a chest breather. Let's have a look at what was going on there. Okay, you're on the cross
Mm.
trainer and you went up to this many breaths per minute, and so that's like I don't think we've ever had that level of data before, and that's I think where a load of magic would come in, because it's one thing to sit with somebody and teach them how to breathe, and it's another thing for them to go off into the real world and carry it on. Well, I don't know if you have any thoughts on what you could do there, or what I've just said.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea. I've never thought of like how, I mean, of course, there's like there's a distinction between conscious and unconscious breathing. So it's like one of those differences. But
Yeah.
what you're saying is that there's also a level of like within the unconscious, there's when you're still unconscious and when you're doing stuff unconscious. And I think it makes a lot of
Mm.
sense. And also like probably not just like when you're moving about, but also situationally, like in your when you're in a meeting, when you're like in different kind of maybe mentally, cognitively difficult situations. I can imagine that also can cause chest breathing. And kind of looping back to where we began this discussion, those are like it goes two ways. It's a signal of what's happening in your head, like around your nervous system, but also like it's causing that, right? It's making it worse because you're like in a meeting, you're a bit stressed out, you start breathing with the chest. That chest breathing makes the situation worse. So you're not performing at your best. You're not probably present with the person you're in front of in your best self. And so, like, I think that's as you mentioned, like, there's like things insight you can gather afterwards. So you look at the session, just at the gym, and see, oh, next time I need to be a bit more aware of this. But also situationally, if you can look at a quick haptic nudge, maybe not as you're doing the squat, but at least like soon after, at least that could already kind of make you situationally more aware. And next time you can change that in the moment instead of being like a lagging thing. And even more importantly, when you're with that person and you're not at your best and you get this quick reminder. For some people, they want to turn it off because they have too much anxiety over even soft nudges. But for a lot of people, I think it will be beautiful just to get this reminder like, hey, be present, take a breath, and then you can be actually at your
Yeah.
best with the other
Yeah.
person, whether it's your colleague or
Yeah.
your son or daughter.
Hadn't even thought about using it on kids. Actually, that's just another. Oh, there's so many things. Um, Tell us what you learned from all these breath coaches. I'm really curious. Like you sat down with loads of people. Like what were your big takeaways from all these conversations?
I think one that maybe to start off is that it takes some kind of individual to go from typically what people done is go from like corporate world into becoming a breath coach. And you do that in pretty much all cases I saw. even though there was very like a lot of variety in exactly where they came from and what they're doing now when it comes to the teaching, they it's always like this beautiful thing where they want to help people. So that's like it is super kind community. Like literally, like the response rate for like me asking like, "Hey, we're doing this cool thing. Do you want to sit down and help me understand what would be most valuable as a product?" The rate of people's answering yes was just, I don't know, 50% or more. Like it's crazy. So as a community, I just want to first of all thank you for if anyone's like listening to this. It's been like just I've felt this warmth from everyone. So that's number one. But the second thing we already kind of touched on is like I asked everyone like, what are the problematic breathing patterns? And I think one like when it comes to diaphragmatic breathing, one that was interesting takeaway is that a lot of people, particularly who done yoga, they misinterpret the words abdominal or belly breathing. And basically, what they do is they start breathing in this way where the belly goes forward, but nothing else moves. And I think maybe you've touched on this in some of the episodes, but like the actual kind of what you would probably want people to do is have the entire body expand, like the whole rib cage going sideways. You have your back going backwards. If you're lying down, you should like feel the ground against your body. And it's I think I heard a really nice analogy from John, the scientific advisor, around this barrel. It's like a barrel moving into all directions. So that was maybe an interesting takeaway, which I hadn't thought of, like people doing kind of belly breathing by just moving the belly. But it's I can even for myself when I do kind of proper like full body abdominal, but diaphragmatic breathing, using the entire like all the muscles and it just feels so different. With even like literally 3 breaths, you feel different. So anyway, that was another one. And then maybe the final one, which is interesting, is that there's so many different types. Like they all kind of are rooted in probably a lot of the similar like pranayama, like this the science that have been there for thousands of years. But we've now expanded into like multiple different directions, which is really beautiful because my at least assumption is that different people, just like with sports, like they all rooted in you moving. But some people like badminton, some people like, football. So if you try to kind of squeeze, oh, you need to do only running, it's going to be too boring and you have people not doing the workouts. I think same with breath work. You probably want to have like ideally hundreds of different modalities that are rooted in a little bit different kind of schools of thought. Ideally, of course, at least some evidence based on what they're doing. But ultimately, like if you have like psychological size, basically like this doing a deep inhale, do another at the end, and then you exhale long. If you actually do that with 3 inhales, it is unlikely that's going to be way worse. So I spoke to this one person who developed this um, new kind of breathwork style where you do 3 inhales and then 3 exhales. It's like this rhythmic breathing style. And I don't think there's any evidence yet to backing that up, whether it's like as powerful as psychological psi. But intuitively, it's probably not going to be much worse because it's very similar in the way you kind of perform it. Who knows? Maybe even more powerful. So I think if we can get more experimentation in the field, more maybe using music in different forms, using movement, I think it's just going to be good for the field. And I think overall, when it comes to like breathing, like one of our maybe goal is a strong word, but like vicious at least is like that breathing becomes almost like a fourth pillar of health. Everyone talks about sleep, nutrition, and exercise. But ultimately, if you don't care about breathing, you're missing like this huge chunk of your health and well-being. Just the same way as sleep affects your ability to exercise, and like whether you are eating well, and same way as like eating affects whether you're exercising well and sleeping well, the breathing does the same. So it really is like the key to metabolizing. Ultimately, it's the oxygen is what's driving like the transformation to ATP, your like energy from food. It also critically impacts sleep, both like the way you breathe during the day, but also of course when you're sleeping, how you breathe impacts the quality and the depth of sleep. And then when it comes to exercise, I mean that's super clear. Like you can get huge performance gains within the session, but also recovery wise. You can if you do a quick breathing exercise, you can actually recover so much faster because the nervous system is driving how quickly you can upregulate during the session or during your workouts and how quickly you can downregulate. So this anyway, I think I'm again preaching to the choir here to you, but it does feel like this breathing as the fourth pillar is just a interesting concept and something we should do kind of aim to build. And that will not be done by one company. So that will be a tribe. And I think that will be a cool community that we can keep speaking. I think you've done a huge amount of work around educating people on breathing. So I think together we can kind of help people understand, hey, this should be equally important to you as the other three pillars and equally beneficial for your health and well-being.
Yeah. No, I love it. What can you so you and your co-founders and your office, I'm curious to know, like, have you learnt anything about having this on you? What do your routines look like? Are you doing any breath work at the moment? Just give us a little flavor of behind the scenes, like how it might have like changed your lives a little.
Yeah. Yeah, the current version of the device, we have a bunch of prototypes that we've been iterating and making better and better and better. And then, like, one of the, it's a very small thing, but the way you put on the magnet, for example, right? It's like seems pretty small, but from a user experience, it's actually quite important how it feels. And the latest version, I really want to give kudos to our hardware founder, Vas, and Oliver, who helped him here. But he managed to get this latest version in like this snap. It's just so satisfying. It kind of snaps exactly the right way you put it on. And it's like, I think we've taken a lot of inspiration from Apple where you have this MagSafes and stuff where they just snap. That's kind of the feeling we want to have. But anyway, this is a small example. But because the device is currently catered for research, the app is more like an annotation app currently. So it's like start recording, finish, and there's different protocols you can do. And so we've been using the prototypes mostly for doing these like little validations around the rate, the mouth to nose. We just, as mentioned yesterday, recorded this running thing. And so that's kind of the current experience. So that's why probably the if you think about how it's changed current our daily lives, probably not yet as much as it will because we're not using it for like seeing the data in our own app or our phone. The goal is to kind of build out the user-facing app in the coming months, and the first version will, of course, already in, let's say, March, we'll have the first alpha testing. So what, a few weeks now, and then going to beta testing soon after April, May, and then iterating as quickly as we can until the launch. So by the time we hit September and we actually send the devices, the app will actually already be like in a great shape. It's like tested by ideally hundreds of people. It's been used by a lot of people, so there's no like, bugs left. These baby things you have with any software. So anyway, that's kind of where we are. So not much, but when it comes to my personal habits, I I think I came across actually from maybe Wim Hof was the first, but then properly into breathwork came from James Nestor's book. So it's relatively late. I guess when it comes to doing like exploring this deeper. So since then, I've been doing like bunch of little things. And I think more recently, if you think about what I'm doing right now, is when I take our son daycare on the way back, I usually do a bit of oxygen advantage stuff, like breath holds on the exhale while walking back. I do resonance breathing probably a few times a day, but it's more like organically when I feel like I just want to get in this slow cadence rhythm or coherence breathing. Then sometimes, not super regularly, I still do kind of more of these kind of Wim Hof style, like faster cadence, especially when I'm cold or I feel like I need a bit of boost of energy, or like the fire breath. You have like this kind of quick exhale just to get the body going, especially in the afternoon if you want to get a bit of energy and you don't want to have another coffee. So that's kind of my personal one, and I think at some point maybe you can speak with Oliver. He can tell you about the whole protocol he developed for himself for his asthma.
Yeah.
But I think it's quite nuanced in what order, and he's been experimenting on it for many years now. So it's definitely one.
Yeah. So is the point then at at a certain area you'll be able to open up the app and you'll be able to see, I guess, in real time your breathing, and then what will there be like a breathing exercise, and you can kind of like sync the two together, so you can kind of see like it's saying like you should be breathing more like this, and you kind of bring it because that's I was hoping to have that. I had that. There was an AI app that came out, a very small one, but came out a few years ago, and the camera on the phone was meant to watch you, and you could see where, but it just wasn't quite there yet. And so I've always been curious to know, like in real time, could you have a visual breathing exercise that's changing, and it's trying to like maybe it starts here and it starts to slow down. So I don't know. Can you just talk about that because that's kind of the sort of stuff that I would want and I would want to give to my clients.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's on our website, you can see some kind of screen caps of what initial thoughts we have. But the good thing is we still have multiple months to iterate and see what actually is the most powerful way to deliver what we have. But I think high level, it's exactly that. So you have two sides to it. One is the data, giving you like understanding of different things that are happening for the last, let's say, few hours, few days, few weeks. So like just helping you understand what's happening beneath the surface that you haven't been able to see before. And then, of course, delivering insights based on that, seeing patterns, detecting them, whether it's like some like Mondays that seems to be happening, or maybe when you do X, Y happens, giving you correlation analyses. So if we detect automatic stuff from, like, I don't know, if you connect to Apple Health or Google Health, maybe seeing like, hey, this thing has this positive correlation with your nervous system or your breathing day index. So that's kind of one side of it, is just kind of helping you with insights. And the other side, as I mentioned, is like the intervention, like actually changing things. So in the middle, you have this piece of like coaching. So recommending what should be the thing you should do right now. But a lot of people, especially in the beginning, will be have like they have some sort of volition of like, I want to get into X state. I want to get either into more parasympathetic state. I want to get calm, relax, or I want to get focus mode. I want to get creative. I want to get more. I want to wake up in the morning. So of course, we'll offer people the possibility to choose what they want to get into, and then we'll recommend the exercise which has basically evidence-based, from science, to get there fastest and quickest. And then we have, of course, a few different options so we can test and tweak for you what seems to be the fastest way to get there. And same with the parameters. And then when it comes to the actual kind of breathing exercise experience or the session experience, yeah, it's interesting. Like, there's so many ways to do that, and we've benchmarked like some of the best ones. As mentioned, the Oxa had good audio experience, this kind of beautiful wave. So maybe that's something there we could explore. There's a lot of apps that do this kind of like expanding particles, like a visual experience. I think there's something we should explore there as well. But also, I think a lot of people actually, that at least on the breathing coach side that I spoke to, they would prefer to do something that's kind of eyes closed and ideally even without the pods. So we probably should also explore the haptic side. Can we haptically give you a like a bzz, 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 or something like that, where it's like help makes it easy to guide you to the right breathing. The only difficulty there is like not just giving the guidance, but also kind of giving a sense of where you are. And that's probably where we'll need probably either the visual or the audio feedback to kind of give you the comparison between the guidance and where you are. Because if without that, it's going to be just another breathing app. Because you can get the guidance anywhere, even with Garmin, it gives you like the buzzing of when to exhale, when to inhale. The beautiful thing is like if you can do that while understanding what's happening and giving you guidance. That's why I think the coaching aspect becomes interesting. Well, I think it will never replace the human being as next to you and giving you guidance like how to use your diaphragm and all that stuff like in real time. But at least we can give you like, hey, Mike, see if you can go a little bit further on the inhale, or see if maybe remember to close your mouth on your exhale. Like little things we can detect and then give guidance audio visually. I think will be just help a lot with this exercise. So to answer your question originally, yes, it's something like that. We're just still trying to figure out what's the most powerful and really engaging way to experience that.
Yeah, cool. So one thing I've been really curious about is respiratory rates over time, and I think it was actually Nesta. I was really lucky. I got onto his first ever breath retreat in Costa Rica in 2022, and he was talking about respiratory rates over time and how I think since Buteyko in the 60s they've been trending upwards. So we're actually breathing faster as a race. But it's been really hard to find like any data on that. So I'd love to get your thoughts on some of that.
Yeah. I actually haven't looked into the data, but it kind of makes sense, at least from you
Really?
look at everything else we're tracking and how they're relating to each other. You would expect if there's like slightly more anxiety, more mental health issues, more um, kind of everything that affects the nervous system to be in this constant sympathetic, almost like background state, you would expect the respiratory rate to also go up. And that sounds like that's happening. Um, I actually haven't seen either like a lot of data sets, probably because like as we discussed with breathing variability in the beginning, there aren't many devices that can accurately see this um, like on day in day out across population. So if of course at some point we reach like a decent scale, so we have like I think Oren has several millions of rings. I think Apple Watch has 280 million rings. The Apple Watch is sold. If we reach like those levels of scale, then of course it would be really interesting to start aggregating some of this stuff and just like see population level, like as a whole, or maybe per country, like what are we seeing across the whole. I think Garmin has done a good job of like doing that across like steps, and they can show you like even you as an individual, where do you stand against your peers and your age group, against your gender. So like, yeah, I think that as long as we make sure we aggregate in a way that's actually private, so it's like fully privatized, and like there's nothing you can recognize, just aggregated as a whole, this bunch of stuff. That could be really interesting to see what are the rates and what's been like, if we track it for like multiple years, do we see a change? And also like do we see like at least correlations between things? Because that's kind of it's not useful unless you can do something about it. So if we see like, hey, this group of people are doing X and that's improving this, or maybe we see that, hey, once you utilize this and this breathing technique on like every morning, people who've done this resonance breathing, for example, have been managed to get their breathing rate down. That'll be like an actual useful insight. It's like almost like a prescription for the rest of us. So anyway, that's kind of something I'm excited about, is like if we can work with like basically the healthcare professionals long term in like having some insights they can use for guidance, for guidelines, and so forth. But yeah, it will take a bit of time to get to that scale where we can actually support. But in the meantime, it sounds like worth looking into maybe with other devices.
Yeah, it's really, again, I feel like we're having this conversation so early. I can't wait to see where we are in like 12 months or a couple of years, because I feel like this is such groundbreaking tech. You just got me excited about, like, in sleep, you have chronotypes. You have like the owl, night owl, and the early morning riser. But then over time, um, they change. And so like a teenager sleeps in later, or, baby gets up early, and the old person seems to get up really, and it seems to like fluctuate. And I'm just wondering if there'll be like there's breathing types that we'll find over like different age groups.
Interesting.
It'd
I
be really interesting.
Mike,
Yeah.
did you see the paper where they looked at like apparently breathing, kind of the way you breathe is as unique as your fingerprints. Did you see that paper?
No. No, tell me about that.
Yeah, I guess I need afterwards. Maybe we can link it in the show notes. But it's really fascinating. Apparently, if you just look at the breathing patterns, like acoustically, but even just like with the rates and patterns and tidal volume, you can detect, like, like you can basically see not who it is, of course, but like it is unique. So you can across time, if you have this breathing rate of one person and then you show like a data set of like 1,000 ones, you can detect exactly where that person is. So anyways, just again, a fascinating thing. Could it be like at some point encryption key in the future, like in addition to your face ID, if you don't want to have your face somewhere in a vault, could your breathing become that key? It's a bit of a sci-fi thing to say,
Oh,
but
I
who
love it.
knows?
I love it. So as we come towards the end, let's just talk again, because I'd love, if people have resonated with this and they want to support and get the Kickstarter, just talk us a little bit about it. And there's one bit actually maybe you could just mention. Like, I
Sure.
I'm sick of like subscriptions. I know there are some subscriptions that you offer, but I just mentioned before we hit record, like, I've got my Aura ring, I've got all these different things. So maybe you could just talk a bit about like what you get if if you do monthly, or like do you have to do monthly? So maybe if you could just give people a bit of an overview about what they're getting if they move ahead.
Of course. Yeah, so maybe starting with the device. So when we launch this in the end of the year, the price will be 399 USD. That's roughly the equivalent in other currencies. Um, and basically, we're offering now on Kickstarter at 299. So a pretty significant discount for the wait, because it's like ultimately what 7 8 months of waiting. So we want to reward you for that. Um, and when it comes to the membership, like that's as you mentioned, like when we spoke to people about what they like, what they don't like about their wearables, one of the thing that kept creeping up is this like fatigue with subscriptions. So we wanted to at least make sure that the core features, all the stuff that people really want and expect from our wearable, can be gotten on what we call just a free tier. So if you get the device, you can get pretty much everything we've discussed today around like the dashboard, the some of the insights, like the environmental correlations, also all the breathing exercises, pretty much all of that, the haptic notifications, it's part of the free package. And then the data is stored kind of locally on your phone. So there's like not a huge amount of cost for us when that happens. So we can run this sustainably, even if nobody else ever takes the membership package, which is then paid. And on top of that, we then offer what we call memberships. It's about $10 a month. And the reason we do that, first of all, is that if you think about the potential here, we already spoke about the AI making things possible that weren't possible before. And to do that, you need a lot of data processing. And that is not free. Like whether using traditional machine learning techniques with like neural networks, CNN, like convoluted neural network, or using these modern LLM approaches, they're even more expensive with like token usage. So if you want to build a sustainable company that is not dependent on either ads or selling your data to like random pharma companies, you need to have something that pays off the kind of monthly costs. So what we decided is to have this free tier, which covers vast majority of what you need, and have this like I would say pretty affordable membership tier for the ones who want to go deeper. And what you get for that $10 is basically all the AI stuff. So it's like personalization of the session, prescriptions of what learning patterns, like what seems to work for you psychophysiologically. And I think that will be, of course, something, well, both will expand the possibilities of both tiers. But of course, the what's possible here is going to keep expanding as the technology expands on AI and the foundational models will improve. Although I think we actually are planning on at least considering having our own kind of proprietary LLM, which is going to be then easier because it's like private, right? So you don't have your stuff in some random OpenAI server. So we can actually have it, probably using like an open weight Mistral model or something, and then essentially build up a model that is not really a language model per se. It's same structure, like this what they call like a transformer model with these vectors of understanding kind of how things like correlate with each other, predicting the next token. But fundamentally, it's using kind of the actual like long-term longitudinal physiological data with the intervention. So when you give this happens, and there's like different things we can do, and then insights, of course, like the coach that is with you and giving you guidance both during the sessions and in between the sessions. So that's why we wanted to have that, even though we know that a lot of people are tired of these things, and the question then becomes like, is it valuable? Like if you pay already, I don't know, $60 for your gym membership, and now like I think these have the great strength apps that are 20 bucks a month. Some of the best breathwork apps actually cost I think 10 or 15 already. And I think we could do much better than your typical like breathwork app with them recordings, but we'll see. So anyway, that's like the short summary. So if you hate that, you can get rid of it. And by the way, in the Kickstarter, we also offer this kind of lifetime membership for the people that want the full experience, but without the monthly cost. So I know it's just like a nice thing for people like, your friend who is early. We want to reward those people. They get like a nice deal basically to buy in early, get that for the rest of your life, and not have to worry about it.
Very cool. Well, I've loved this conversation. I'm genuinely excited about this, which is why I was so keen to have you on. And I would really encourage people to just click the link, have a look at the Kickstarter, and if you can get in early. And I feel like this is going to be a very important tech, and I hope it becomes mainstream over the next couple of years. So thank you, Patrick, for everything you're doing. Are there any last words to close us off? Anything you wanted to share?
I think the only thing just I would encourage people to think about, as you mentioned, like if whether it's ours or other technology like ours becomes adopted, and
Mm,
suddenly people who've been on the passenger seat with their nervous system, they're like, and they're also like not making it better. They're screaming at the driver to drive faster, like pushing the accelerator pedal without even realizing it.
mm.
What happens if we suddenly give them the steering wheel? Like, hey, drive. You can break the pedal. You have the gas pedal. Here's how you do it. What would the world look like if that's the case? Just imagine that world. And at least I would imagine that it's a little bit different, right? Like you have less parents screaming at the children. You have less kind of this nibbling, with coworkers. There's so much we can do with this small slight change. And then on top of that, I will add one, I would say, not caveat, but just a warning. And I think I've been guilty of this. Is like once we become good, I think it's the same with meditation, whether it's meditation or breath work, it can become this like a crux or a tool for avoiding your emotions. So
Mm.
you suddenly like you feel a bit scared, maybe you have fear in your system, and then you use your breath work to get rid of the fear, or you kind of push it away. And I've done it myself, like with meditation, you kind of learn to be mindful, and then you basically utilize your cool techniques to get rid of those emotions, whether they're like anger or fear or otherwise. And just personally, I've been working on this now for some time, like a couple of years now, specifically with this system called Art of Accomplishment by Joe Hudson. Just a shout out to those guys there. And specifically what they kind of teach you, which I think is quite beautiful, is like to welcome. Like if you have this fear with an email that comes through, instead of like pushing it away with a quick breathwork exercise, see if you can kind of welcome that, let it wash over you, a fear, because actually the sensations of fear, they're not that unpleasant. They actually can be very pleasant. So seeing that if you can kind of, oh, it's a bit of a tingling fear here, a bit of like warmth in my chest, and oh, that's quite nice. And then, of course, on top of that, you can do the breathing exercise to help the welcoming with this parasympathetic nervous state. So, and of course, before you respond, if you have anger, it is definitely helpful to calm the system down before you respond. But then at the same time, the anger should be felt, ideally expressed, not towards the person, but just in a physical way, because otherwise it will just keep bubbling under. And at least in my case, I was one of those people I couldn't almost like feel some of my body too much. Like the emotions where I'd been kind of somehow like putting them behind the closet in some ways, and not wanting to feel, I think, shame and a bunch of other things there. So once I began to actually kind of let myself feel them, yeah, everything just became much more pleasant, and joyful. So yeah, I'll just leave that as a last thing, is like, yes, breath work is important. Nervous system mastery can be amazing in life, but don't do it at like as a tool to avoid your own emotions.
Oh, so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think that Tony Robbins, I think, says something like, everything we do is for a feeling. Even if you want to win the lottery and become a multimillionaire, why are you doing it? Because you want the feeling, whatever that feeling is. So thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. This idea of being embodied, and actually we're in this beautiful body, and we should feel it. So yeah, no, beautiful way to close this off. Thank you so much for being here, and everybody, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Leave us a comment below what you learned from this, and please check out the Kickstarter page. All right, Patrick, I hope we do this again once you've launched, and we can share it a bit more with people. All right, brilliant. Thanks,
Beautiful.
everyone.
Thank you, Mike.
Cheers. Thank you for sticking all the way through. If you would like to get your own version of this wearable, then you can join the Kickstarter right now. So the link is down below. It's open for a couple more days. And I don't know if you picked it up from me, but I'm very excited about this. This just looks really, really cool. I get to geek out. I get to learn more about my breathing as well. So the link is down below for the Kickstarter. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please give us a thumbs up and a comment. Like, what did you learn from today's show? Because that comment will then help other people go, oh, that's quite cool. And we want to share knowledge. We want to simplify breath work for people so they can actually use it in their lives. So thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this conversation, you might enjoy this one up here as well. All right, cheers.